Good morning, all of you. I welcome you all to Insarkari. So let's start with today's analysis that is going to be for 19th of February 2023. So we'll be talking about 12 cheetahs that have arrived from South Africa and they have been taken to the Kuno National Park, which is there in Madhya Pradesh. And apart from that, we'll be talking about the Indo-Tibetan Border Police and the border with China and the security infrastructure related to all of that. So we have been seeing that the civil aviation industry, they have placed a jumbo order for aircrafts. So basically already hit by a crew shortage. So the industry is already like, because we are seeing that there is a sudden increase in demand when it comes to civil aviation. So airline group will need almost 7,000 to 8,000 pilots over the coming years to fly the new planes that it has ordered. And so this basically open up new job opportunities for the people in the civil aviation industry. So dues of the states have been cleared by the GST Council, and GST appellate tribunals are going to, like, they get notes, so they'll be formulated. So on Saturday, there was a GST Council meeting. So there was a broad consensus on the long awaited constitution of the GST Appellate Tribunal to resolve the rising number of disputes under the 68-month-old indirect tax regime that are now clogging the high courts and other judicial fora. So that is going to help in reducing the pendency of the cases. And the council also reduced the tax levy on few items, which includes liquid jaggery and pencil sharpeners. So that is there. And the GST Council is chaired by the Union Finance Minister, and it also announced that the center was releasing GST compensation dues to the states amounting to rupees around 33,000 crores. And the money comes from the exchequer's own coffers, as the GST compensation cess fund does not have an adequate balance. So you need to find out more about the GST compensation cess fund, its entire structure, and also about GST Council. Then you need to find out more about the GST appellate tribunals also. So Tamil Nadu government moves Supreme Court saying that NEET violates the basic structure and federalism. So NEET is the National Eligibility Cum Entrance Test, and this is the sole gateway for entry into the medical courses in which, so basically this is a kind of an entrance examination if you want to get into the medical colleges. But the state government of Tamil Nadu says that this this is the only gateway. So they are saying that it violates the basic structure of the constitution and also the right to equality, and it is against the principle of federalism. So the suit under Article 131 has arranged the Union of India as a defendant, and it said that the court should declare the marks obtained in the NEET will be criterion for the admission to medical and allied courses, as ultra violates the provisions of the Constitution, violative of the basic structure of the Constitution, and are manifestly arbitrary as being violative of Article 14 also, which talks about the right to equality. So it is also kind of violation of autonomy, and the introduction of NEET is also violative of the federal structure, as it takes away the power of the states to admit students to government seats in the medical colleges. So firstly, it is also important for us to know that education as a subject is there under the concurrent list, and it was earlier there in the state list, so it has been moved to the concurrent list. So education, it is subject within the competence of the state to make laws on, and the states, they have the right to control the education for the state universities. So in this context, the government of Tamil Nadu is saying that this violates their autonomy when it comes to taking decisions in regard to education of the state. So, when we talk about the Global Investor Summit, which was being held in Uttar Pradesh, so even that is displaying regional disparity, because there are only few regions which have received maximum amount of investment. And here, even this pie chart is showing the similar thing, that like when we talk about Gautam Budh Nagar, so it has received almost 27% of the total investment, and other 70 districts have just around 48% of the total investment. So this is the regional disparity, and again, then obviously it leads to disparity in income. There is obviously income inequality increase in that, and likewise people then start migrating to only these particular regions. So underwater noise emissions, they pose threat to the marine life. Underwater noise emissions. So this is noise pollution. And here the spectrograph is saying that sound is a form of energy for the marine mammals, which is being denied to them by man-made noise, with disastrous results for marine species. And what is the way out then? So there is a need to develop green ports. Then, since ocean noise levels, they are increasing at 0.55 decibels per year, regulations are needed to reduce it by at least 3 decibels in the next 5 years. Thirdly, speed of ships, that should be less than 5 knots up to the port limits. So obviously speeds, that also generates noise pollution, and rerouting of the shipping lanes away from the foraging region of marine species is also recommended. So these points, they are again, they become important. So you can note them down at one place, all these points. Then here, like it is talking about that 62 olive ridley turtles, they were found dead on the Vizag Bimili coastal stretch in Andhra Pradesh. Then 150 olive ridley turtles and the bottlenose dolphins, they were also found dead on the Puri beach, which is there in Odisha. And 250 baleen whales and 30 carcasses of the same species, they were found stranded in the shallow waters of the Tiruchendur beach in the Tamil Nadu. So where you can find out more about the olive ridley turtles, and obviously they are important in the context of Odisha. So the sea coast, and if there is any wildlife sanctuary for them. So Munnar, which is there in the state of Kerala, it sees rare weather pattern as mercury dips to sub-zero levels again. So you can see tea plantation here, and this is there in the Idukki district of Kerala. So after a month, the mercury dipped to sub-zero levels again at the hill station of Munnar in Kerala's Idukki district, and the month's lowest temperature was of -1 degree Celsius. So again, these are the impacts of the climate change that we are seeing. And as per the data from the United Planters Association of South India Tea Research Foundation, the temperature recorded on the Lechmi estate, it was at 0 degrees Celsius. So the temperature mostly it was recorded at either 1 degree or 0 degrees Celsius. So obviously this would be then impacting the food cultivation or whatever crops are grown in that region. And here we are seeing that tea plantations would obviously be impacted, because when it comes to, so here it becomes important for you to find out about the climatic conditions, what are the suitable climatic conditions which are important for tea cultivation. So there was unexpected frost that has adversely affected the tea plantations. So here we come to know that frost, it hampers and it negatively impacts the tea plantations, and tea leaves, they have largely wilted on various estates due to this frost-like condition. So sanctions hit Russia. It proposes manufacture of its civil jet in India. And so sanctions hit Russia, which is going for import substitution in a big way. It has proposed to manufacture its Sukhoi Superjet civil aircraft in India. And the plane maker United Aircraft Corporation is in talks with the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. So obviously this will be even like bringing in the advanced technology into India, and again helping in expertise in this particular area. Apart from that, we offered to the Indian side to assemble the Sukhoi Superjet with the foreign made components here in India in line with the international technical specifications. So basically they are in talks right now, and obviously Russia, it has been hit by sanctions because of the Russia-Ukraine war and its actions in Ukraine. And apart from that, India has been like leveraging the opportunity that we have when it comes to importing the discounted crude oil from Russia. So coinciding with the first anniversary of the India-UAE Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, the two sides, they have established the UAE chapter of the UAE-India Business Council. So this bilateral outfit was launched by UAE's Minister of State for Foreign Trade, and so this council is poised to play a big role in supporting both the governments in maximizing UAE and India relationship. So 12 cheetah from South Africa, they enter the quarantine in the Kuno National Park in Madhya Pradesh, and they landed on the Gwalior airport, and the animals were taken to their new home by the helicopter. So a step to revive back the population of cheetahs in India. And apart from that, so that is the important information. And so earlier we got cheetahs from Namibia, and now we are getting it from South Africa. So you can find out if there is any difference between the population. So that can be important for us. So George Soros, he is like again come up with like some statements regarding the Adani group of companies and the nexus between the government and the Adani. So the external affairs minister says that he is opinionated and dangerous. So the billionaire investor George Soros is his old rich, opinionated and dangerous, and invests resources in shaping the narratives. And responding to a question on the Sydney dialogue, so the external affairs minister says that he's an old, rich, opinionated person sitting in New York who still thinks that his views should determine how the entire world works. So apart from that, this issue is being like looked into by the Supreme Court. Also, a committee would be formed to like properly investigate and research about all the reports that have been released by the Hindenburg Research Group. So when we talk about rural tourism, so tapping the potential of niche villages, it is a push for the same, that is rural tourism. And in this picture, you can see an agrarian cottage at Machli of Maharashtra. So that is there. And Matur is a village in Karnataka where residents, they speak only in Sanskrit. And Mashli in Maharashtra is an agrarian homestay surrounded by coconut, betel, and banana plantations. Then we have the Bishnoi village in Rajasthan that has frequent visits from the endangered great Indian bustards. So these are destinations where tourists they can like immerse themselves in the rural tourism experience that the government is now developing and focusing upon. So here it becomes important to promote sustainable tourism, and it would be avoiding large scale infrastructure development and without much private sector participation. So instead, efforts would be to rope in the local resources in the communities to provide a unique organic experience. So people are now looking towards having organic and simple experiences when it comes to tourism, specifically when we talk about the rural tourism. And this would be then again boosting job opportunities for the community, the local community of the village, and helping them increase their income levels also. So that would be in a way again pushing the demand, specifically the rural sector's demand. Then we have the Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana. Then we have the Mission Organic Value Chain Development in the northeastern region, where the development is the rural tourist spots. So organic agriculture area is also being promoted as one of the subsectors when it comes to rural tourism. So not only can the rural tourism it revitalize the local art and crafts and prevent viable traditional occupations from being displaced, it will also help redevelop the rural areas and rejuvenate the rural life, create jobs and new business opportunities. So in this picture, you can see the rhododendrons, and they can be an important indicator of the climate change. So they are found in Darjeeling and in the Sikkim Himalayas, rhododendrons, and they're home to more than okay, so Darjeeling and Sikkim Himalayas, they're home to more than one third of all the types of rhododendrons which are found in India. And this is as per the Botanical Survey of India's report. Apart from that, there are around 132 types of rhododendrons which are found in India. And so 34% of them are found in, again, as I just said, in Darjeeling and Sikkim Himalayas. And this highlights the ecological significance of this region as far as an indicator species like rhododendron is concerned. So these are indicator species also. And so there is like pressures in terms of the anthropological pressures, which is because of the human activities and also because of the climate change. So we are seeing that we recorded a huge habitat decline in both Darjeeling and in Sikkim. And it's a big purple flower which is found in the Lachung area of North Sikkim, and it is facing threats from the rampant construction activities. So rhododendron, it means rose tree in Greek, and it is considered an indicator species for the climate change. And talking about its flowering season, so it starts in March and continues till May. And recently it was found that it was found to be as early as January for some species. So this is an indication that those areas they are getting warmer. And the phenology of the rhododendrons can be an important indicator of the climate change. And they also have an important place in the country's botanical history. So they were first recorded by Captain Hardwick in Jammu and Kashmir in 1776, where he spotted the rhododendron. Coming to the world page, we seen that. So the earthquake toll it passes 46,000 in Turkey. And still people are still being like found alive under the debris after so many days of earthquake. So you can find out more about African Union, and there was a recent summit. So Israel condemned the severe expulsion of a diplomat from the African Union summit, accusing Iran of orchestrating the move with help from Algeria and South Africa. So Russia committed crimes against humanity in Ukraine, says Kamala Harris. And US has determined that Russia has committed crimes against humanity in Ukraine, the Vice President Kamala Harris said, and she insisting that justice must be served to the perpetrators. So international community has both a moral and a strategic interest in pursuing those crimes, pointing to a danger of other authoritarian governments taking advantage if international rules are undermined. So North Korea fires missile as US and South Korea they prepare for the drills. We like talked about this yesterday also. And so they are like basically firing intercontinental ballistic missile test flights. And the experts said that these demonstrated the potential to reach the US mainland if fired on a normal trajectory also. So these intercontinental ballistic missiles can even target US from North Korea, even when they are traveling on their normal trajectory. And the US Indo Pacific Command said that the launch did not pose an immediate threat to the US personnel or the territory or to our allies, but said that it will continue to monitor the situation, and it called on North Korea to refrain from any further unlawful and destabilizing acts. Coming to the science page, WHO has not abandoned the COVID-19 origin investigation. So, still, this investigation about finding out the origin of the COVID-19 is still on. And 2 years after the WHO's visit to China to investigate the origin of COVID-19, WHO has abandoned the second phase of investigation, it said, and quoted WHO's technical lead for COVID-19 that there is no phase 2 of this investigation. So physical competition is effective for the rising whale population. So post whaling increases in eastern Australian humpback whale numbers may have led to males shifting their mating tactics from singing to physically competing with other males, highlighting how humpback whales they have adapted their social behaviors as their populations have recovered. And that is there. And when we talk about why environmental surveillance for avian influenza is vital. So birds infected with the avian influenza virus, they shed large quantities of virus in their feces as well as in their saliva and nasal secretions for about 1 week. And there is a danger of further spreading this disease. So in India, there is no active surveillance for the avian influenza virus in the poultry birds. India is the fastest growing egg producer in the world, yet the poultry birds are not vaccinated against the flu. So again, there's a danger. And then talking about the transmission of this virus within the wild bird population is dependent on the fecal or the oral transmission via contaminated water. Then avian influenza viruses, they have been isolated from unconcentrated water in lakes in the US, Canada, and China. And these viruses, they can remain viable for extended periods of time in surface water and even in their carcasses. So lakes and wetlands, they can act as environmental reservoirs at variable temperatures for several months. And surveillance network for influenza virus is needed across multiple sites to improve understanding on virus diversity and seasonal and geographical distribution of the virus in the environment. So environmental surveillance becomes important in this case, and it is a non-invasive tool and it should be complemented with effective carcass collection and their testing. So avian influenza is known as H5N1, and it was also known as bird flu. So, and this virus has caused unprecedented loss of tens of thousands of birds, even in UK. So there is a growing risk because of this virus. So what is important is environmental surveillance, and apart from that, getting them vaccinated against this flu. A new form of medium density amorphous ice has been discovered. So ball milling ordinary ice at low temperatures, a process that involves vigorously shaking a cryogenically cooled container full of ice and steel balls, creates an amorphous form with a density which is close to liquid water. And the findings suggest that water is more complex at low temperatures than previously recognized. Frozen water can take many forms, and there are 20 known crystalline phases of water ice and at least 2 families of amorphous form. So how is stock market regulated in India? And again, this is because of the whole issue regarding the Adani stock of companies. So what is the regulatory framework in a place to protect the investors from the share market volatility? Does the Securities and Exchange Bureau of India have the power to act in the interest of the investors? And what are the laws to help SEBI? And when can it step in? So we'll be looking into details of this whole issue and the regulation of the stock market in India. So I hope you all must be knowing about the regulator, that is SEBI, Securities and Exchange Board of India. And on 10th of February, Supreme Court has asked SEBI and the government to produce the existing regulatory framework in place to protect the investors from share markets volatility. So volatility is obviously when there is large fluctuations in the prices of shares of different companies. So it poses a risk to the interest of the investors. So after the short seller Hindenburg Group, it published a report in January accusing the Adani Group of companies of the stock market manipulation and accounting fraud. Its shares plummeted, and investors were reported to have lost lakhs of crores of rupees because of so much of fall. They've been like under free fall, and it has like massively impacted the investors' interest. So, what are the laws governing the market in India? So, securities market in India is regulated by 4 key laws, and that includes the Companies Act of 2013, the Securities and Exchange Board of India Act of 1992, the Securities Contracts Regulation Act of 1956, and the Depositories Act of 1996. So, these are the 4 main laws. And SEBI Act, it empowers SEBI to protect the interest of the investors and to promote the development of the capital or the securities market besides regulating it. So SEBI was given this power to register the intermediaries like the stockbrokers, the merchant bankers, portfolio managers, and regulate their functioning by prescribing eligibility criteria, conditions to carry on the activities, and periodic inspections. Then it also has the power to impose penalties, such as monetary penalties, including suspending or canceling the registrations also. So powers are definitely there with SEBI. And can SEBI step in to curb this market volatility? So while SEBI does not interfere to prevent the market volatility, exchanges, they have circuit filters. So there is like two things, upper circuit and lower circuit, to prevent excess of volatility. So suppose the prices of any company, they hit the upper circuit. So upper circuit is the maximum amount of the price that can be achieved in like suppose there is today's trading session. So whenever we say that the upper circuit has been hit, so that is the maximum price up to which the shares can rise, and lower circuit is the minimum price up to which the shares can fall. So this limit, in a way, it in a kind of way, it tries to prevent the excess volatility or excess fluctuations in the prices. So the price can only fluctuate between the upper circuit and the lower circuit. But SEBI can also issue directions to those who are associated with the market and has the power to regulate trading and settlement on the stock exchanges also. So using these powers, SEBI, it can direct the stock exchanges to stop the trading totally or selectively. It can also prohibit the entities or the persons from buying, selling, or dealing in the securities, from raising funds from the market, and being associated with intermediaries or the listed companies. So all the powers are there with SEBI, and it can take steps accordingly as per the situation. So what are the guidelines on fundraising? So we'll not go into this. And what about the stock exchanges? So an important aspect of the regulation of the stock exchanges is also the provision for arbitrating the disputes that arise between the stockbrokers who trade on the stock exchanges and the investors who are clients of such stockbrokers. So the act also seeks to protect the interest of the investors by creating an investor protection fund for each stock exchange. And what are the safeguards against if there is any fraud? So fraud undermines the regulation and prevents the market from being fair and transparent. SEBI notified the prohibition of fraudulent and unfair trade practices regulation in 1995 and prohibition of insider trading regulations in 1992 to prevent the two forms of fraud. So one is market manipulation and second is the insider trading. So basically insider trading is when an investor or a person who is suppose an employee in a company and he has access to certain price sensitive information which is not available with the public. So when that insider information is used by that particular person to carry out his like investment decision or trading decision, so that is what do we mean by insider trading. And these regulations, they when we read with the provisions of SEBI, they define the species of fraud who is an insider and prohibit such fraudulent activities. And again, there are penalties for that also. So that is there. So corporate activities include the acquisition of other companies, merger of the companies, and buyback of shares. So SEBI has again notified the substantial acquisition of shares and takeovers regulations. So we have regulations and everything is being covered. And appeals against the orders of SEBI and the stock exchanges can be made to the Securities Appellate Tribunal, comprising 3 members. So appeals from the Securities Appellate Tribunals, they can be made to the Supreme Court further. So you can find out more about SAT, which is the Securities Appellate Tribunal. So recently, West Bengal introduced an additional dose of polio vaccine under the immunization program. And we have the universal immunization program for children. So the state considered among high-risk areas for the polio, it has announced that this dose will be given at 9 months in addition to the existing doses in the current program. So what is polio? So polio is a kind of virus disease, a viral disease that can invade the central nervous system, and as it's like multiplies, it destroys the nerve cells that activate the muscles and causing irreversible paralysis in hours. So it is a very like dangerous disease, a viral disease which impacts a central nervous system and leads to paralysis. So there are 3 types of poliovirus serotypes, which is type 1, 2, and 3. And according to the India Polio Learning Exchange, Along with UNICEF, of these paralyzed, 5 to 10% of the people they die when their breathing muscles they become immobilized. So it is life-threatening disease and there is no cure for polio, but there are safe, effective vaccines which give multiple times, which when given multiple times, they protect a child for life. So polio held the world in a bind of fear until the Jonas Salk developed the first polio vaccine. So first one was developed by Jonas Salk, and later we had Albert Sabin who made the live polio vaccine that could be administered orally, which became the tool of the trade, so especially for nations carrying out mass immunization campaigns, specifically in India. So, how did India achieve its polio free status? So, in 2012, WHO removed India from the list of the endemic countries. And seen as a massive achievement in public health in India, the campaign had begun years ago. So, while Rotary International launched its polio eradication campaign, the Polio Plus in 1985, it was in 1986 that it provided a $2.6 million of grant to Tamil Nadu for a pilot polio vaccination campaign. And as per the India Polio Learning Exchange portal, the last case of polio virus type 2 case was recorded in India in October 1999 at Aligarh. So, as of October 2022, WHO said only 2 countries worldwide they remain with indigenous transmission of the wild polio virus type 1, which is Afghanistan and in Pakistan. So, here you need to remember which type of polio virus is present and which 2 countries still have it. So, it is Afghanistan and Pakistan, and there is type 1 which is found there. So, what was the recent global polio crisis? So recently, the wild poliovirus type 2 was globally eradicated in 1999, but vaccine virus type 2 continued for 16 more years. Routine use of this vaccine was discontinued in 2016 and reintroduced occasionally on purpose. So we are seeing that the type 2 viruses, they are emerging and spreading. So this also posits the theory of respiratory transmission of polio, as was the classical teaching of polio epidemiology. So people assume that virus transmission is by the fecal or the oral route. But what about in the London and New York, where there are high standards of hygiene and sanitation? So there are certain even like doubts regarding their transmission. So what is the future? So we see that events have shown how dramatically and rapidly the global progress can unwind if the pressure is not maintained to vaccinate the children. And we have seen some setbacks, particularly in the area of immunization post the pandemic. But it is very clear we need to keep at what we are doing and enhance the measures to ensure this battle is fought all the way through. So we are seeing that Air India has ordered aircrafts in bulk, and so we've been like talking about the increasing demand in the civil aviation sector, and basically it is growing. So there have been more orders put for the aircrafts. So India's eyes and ears on the China border, and what? So with the line of actual control remaining tense, India is raising 7 new battalions of the famed patrol force, which is the Indo-Tibetan Border Police, which was formed in 1962 after the war with China, and that was for effective monitoring of the border region with China. So they are basically there in Arunachal Pradesh, in Sikkim, and in Ladakh Union Territory. Apart from that, in Uttarakhand also. So they are deployed from the Karakoram Pass in the northwest to the Jachipla in Arunachal Pradesh in the northeast. And ITBP was restructured in 1978 to include 9 service battalions. Apart from that, So in 1992, Parliament also enacted the Indo-Tibetan Border Police Force Act. So ITBP conducts short and long-range patrols, special missions, and joint patrols to dominate unmanned gaps along the China border. And the force has also built 25 strategic roads. Another 32 roads are also under construction. So ITBP has also been deployed in foreign countries as well, and it provided security at the India High Commission in Colombo from 1988 to 2005. They were also first deployed in Afghanistan in 2002, and they were withdrawn from Afghanistan in August 2021 after the Indian embassy it shut following the takeover of the country by the Taliban regime. So when we talk about monetization of land by the government, so it taps consultants for that, and pre-bid conference with the prospective global property consultants. It's scheduled for next week, says the officials from DPM. And DPM, which is also involved when it comes to disinvestment. So it is working on strategic sales, the PSUs, including Concor, Shipping Corporation of India, and BML, which is steering the demerger of these companies and non-core and the land assets before the sale. So there needs to be we have the National Land Monetization Corporation. So it has decided to rope in international property consultancy firms to help strategize and implement the transactions from start to finish. So it becomes important when it comes to asset identification. So that must be correct. And proposals have been invited. So the corporation has now invited proposals from international property consultancy firms regarding this. So NSE, that is the National Security Exchange, is going to include Adani Wilmer and Adani Power in the indices from 31st of March. So NSE is basically an index which has several companies in it. So there are 50 companies. We have the name of the stock. The index is Nifty 50. So there are 50 companies. So these two companies would also be made a part of this index when the price would be calculated. So this index, in a way, it kind of shows the performance of a stock market on a particular day. And that is there. So leading stock exchange NSE has tweaked the constituents of its major indices, with the Adani Group's two companies, Adani Wilmar and Adani Power, all set to make their way into some of the Nifty's indices from 31st of March. So they are, on the one hand, they are being included under this index, and on the other, there is whole Adani issue which is going up regarding stock manipulation and accountancy fraud. So this is the irony that we see. And we see that mineral production rose 9.8% in December 2022. So 4G and 5G tech stack, they are ready, and India to be the major telecom technology exporter in the 3 years. So 5G services were introduced in October 2022 with a span of 100 days, and they have been rolled out in 200 plus cities already. And today we are adding approximately 4,500 kilometers of network every year, which amounts to 12 kilometers of new tracks per day. So we have to increase the capacity to such a large extent that there is enough capacity for food grains, enough for coal, small parcels, and every kind of cargo. So this is regarding the freight corridors for the food grains. So in Mint, we'll be talking about why it's too early to claim victory in our inflation fight. So we've been knowing that core inflation is sticky. This is the blue graph you can see. That is, we are not seeing much movements in the core inflation graph. However, retail inflation has been declining, but again in January it has increased to 6.52%. So January's inflation figure disapproves the nation that the war on inflation has been won. So because we were expecting and we were even seeing that inflation had started to moderate, but again the figures of January are little tense for us. So retail inflation in January rose to 6.52% after falling to 5.88% in November and 5.72% in December. And the high base effect had pulled down the retail inflation in November and December to some extent. So high base effect is basically when the base figures were very huge, and when even there was a small fall recorded in the subsequent months, it appeared to be huge. So this is the high base effect. And also the core inflation remains high at the moment. So I've told you how the base effect operates and what do we mean by that. So what else pushed up the retail inflation? So cereal prices, cereal inflation, we have been talking about this also every day. So which forms a little less than a tenth the consumer price index. It is also used to calculate the retail inflation. So that has been also driving up the retail inflation prices. Apart from that, what about the petrol and the diesel prices? So are they also one of the factors responsible for high retail inflation? So we seeing that petrol and the diesel prices, they remain high. They have stopped adding to inflation since the prices, they have not changed since mid of 2022. And over the last 1 year, the price of petrol and diesel, the use for transport, has gone up by just 0.8% and 2.8% respectively. And cooking gas prices also increased by 16.2%. The price of kerosene distributed through PDS has risen by 56%. So what about the core inflation? So core inflation does not take into account the items belonging to the food group and fuel and light group, and petrol and diesel and other fuels for the vehicle, and forms around 52% of the consumer price index. So core inflation does not take into account the food and the fuel inflation prices, and it forms 52% of the CPI, and it continues to be on the higher side. So since the pandemic broke out, it has been higher than 5%, and it has been around 6.5% in the last few months, telling us that inflation has become well entrenched in these systems. And as RBI's governor said, recently he put it out that core inflation remains sticky. So that is one of the major challenges when we talk about the inflation for us as of now. So what does this mean for RBI? So analysts and economists, they have been in a hurry to declare RBI's victory over the inflation, and a few did just that after the CPI figure for December was out. And nonetheless, what the January inflation figure now tells us is that time is yet to come, and still the battle is not over inflation. Hence, it's more than likely that RBI will keep raising the interest rates at least through the first fiscal or the first half of 2023. So further calibrated monetary policy action is warranted to break the persistence of core inflation, and that's the long and the short of it. So we can definitely expect, as of now, we are expecting, looking at the figures, that in future we are going to have more price hikes, more price and more rate hikes, because even the inflation expectations, that also remains higher. So lastly, we'll be taking up the Financial Express. So note has been given for the GST appellate tribunals. We've already looked into all these things. Let's go to the editorial page now. So choose your food well. A plant-based diet may not have adequate amount of proteins, vitamins, and minerals. Balance your food with soy, tuna, nuts, tofu, lentils, spinach for a good source of protein and iron. So you need to make healthy food choices. So what the body mass index won't tell about your health. Even though it's like widely used, so body mass index is considered a screening and not a diagnostic tool, and it has a lot of limitations when it comes to measuring an individual's health. So this is often been used to categorize people into broad categories of underweight, of being like having a normal weight, overweight, or obese, and is primarily used to see trends in the communities. So, however, it has a lot of limitations while measuring an individual's health. And it is not a perfect measure of the body's fatness, as it does not take into account the factors such as the muscle mass, the bone density, and distribution of fat in the body. It means that someone with a high muscle mass, such as an athlete, may have a high body mass index, but he or she can be in an excellent health. So conversely, someone with a low muscle mass and high body fat may have a normal body mass index but be at risk for high health problems. So here we can also see the figures have also been given. So if you have BMI of like less than 18.5, so you would be falling under the underweight category. So normal is between 18.5 and 24.9. Overweight is exceeding that, and obese is over 30, and extremely obese is when you have it more than 35. So we've been seeing that Antarctic ice shelf is melting, and a robot lowered through the ice reveals how the Thwaites shelf is melting, which will help forecast its effect on the global sea level. So a few time back, we also saw that the rising sea level would be again a major challenge in coming times. So that's all for today. Thank you for joining in, Sarkari. I hope you've understood all the key things, and you'll be getting the PDF link in the description box. But do not forget to subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share this video as much as possible. Thank you so much for joining us.